Did you know that over 3.5 million Canadians could soon be at risk of losing their homes? Not because they missed payments or broke the law, but because of a brand new 2026 government policy? It sounds unbelievable, but this sweeping legislation, meant to tackle the housing crisis and climate change, could end up causing the biggest mass displacement in modern Canadian history. Cities are already preparing for major changes, and many homeowners and renters have no idea what's coming. This isn't fear-mongering. From stricter zoning laws and climate compliance codes to skyrocketing property taxes and canceled rental protections, the new rules are creating a perfect storm. Your house could suddenly be non-compliant. Your rent could double overnight. That basement apartment you rely on, it might soon be illegal to live in. The scariest part? Most of these changes are already quietly being rolled out. So what exactly is this law? Who's really behind it? And most importantly, are you at risk? In this video, we break down the 10 biggest reasons this law could force you out and what you can do to protect yourself before it's too late. Number 1. Zoning law overhauls are redefining entire neighborhoods. Imagine waking up one day to find out that your home, the same one you've lived in for years, is now considered non-compliant with your city's new zoning regulations. Sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, right? But that's exactly what's happening in parts of Canada right now, and it's only getting started. In 2026, major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Ottawa began implementing sweeping zoning law changes aimed at increasing urban density. These changes are designed to combat the housing crisis by encouraging multi-unit developments, like triplexes or high-rise apartments in areas previously reserved for single-family homes. On paper, it sounds progressive, but in practice, it's creating chaos for homeowners. Here's how it affects you. If your neighborhood gets reclassified, your home could fall under new restrictions. You might be prohibited from making renovations, adding extensions, or even selling your property unless it meets the new zoning requirements. In some cases, municipalities are already issuing notices requiring homeowners to bring properties up to new code, or face penalties. And for renters, once a property is targeted for redevelopment, tenants can be evicted with minimal notice. What's worse is that many of these zoning changes are happening without clear communication to residents. You might not even know your property is affected until you receive a letter in the mail, or worse, a notice on your door. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Zoning overhauls are changing the definition of what it means to legally live in certain areas. And if you think your home is safe because you've owned it for years, think again. Staying informed about your local zoning updates is no longer optional. It's essential. Number 2. New climate compliance rules could make your home illegal. What if your home suddenly failed a government inspection? Not because it's unsafe, but because it's not green enough. That's exactly what millions of Canadians may face under the new climate compliance rules coming with the 2026 legislation. These rules are being introduced in the name of fighting climate change, but for everyday homeowners and renters, the consequences could be devastating. Under the new standards, homes will be required to meet strict energy efficiency benchmarks. That means upgraded insulation, new windows, modern heating systems, and in some cases, complete electrical overhauls. Sounds reasonable until you see the cost. Experts estimate that bringing an older home up to compliance could cost $20,000 to $60,000 or more. For many families, retirees, and fixed-income households, that's simply impossible. Here's the scary part. Homes that fail to meet these standards may become illegal to rent or sell. Landlords could be forced to evict tenants in order to renovate. Homeowners who can't afford upgrades may be pressured to sell, often at a loss, or face mounting fines. Even worse, some municipalities are already discussing penalties for owners who delay compliance. And renters aren't safe either. As landlords pass upgrade costs onto tenants, rents could skyrocket overnight. Affordable units, especially older apartments and basement suites, may disappear entirely because they're too expensive to retrofit. The intention behind these rules may be good, but the rollout is harsh and unforgiving. There are limited subsidies, long wait lists, and confusing application processes, leaving many Canadians stuck in limbo. If your home was built decades ago, this isn't a future problem. It's a looming reality. Climate compliance is quickly becoming a housing survival issue, and ignoring it could cost you the roof over your head. Number 3. Massive property tax hikes could price you out of your own home. What if you could afford your mortgage but still lose your home because of skyrocketing property taxes? That's the harsh new reality for many Canadians in 2026, thanks to massive tax reassessments triggered by new housing legislation. Under the updated law, municipalities now have the power and the pressure to reassess property values more frequently, especially in neighborhoods undergoing zoning changes or rapid development. If your home is suddenly valued at 2 or even 3 times what it was last year, your property taxes will jump accordingly. And no, you don't get a say in the matter. For many homeowners, especially seniors and families on fixed incomes, this could be financially devastating. Imagine living in the same house for 30 years, only to be told your annual taxes have increased by $4,000 or more dollars, simply because your neighborhood is now seen as high potential for redevelopment. This isn't just happening in big cities. Smaller towns are also jumping on the reassessment bandwagon to generate more revenue, especially as infrastructure costs and climate initiatives rise. And if you can't pay, you risk falling behind, facing liens on your property, or even forced sale through tax default proceedings. The emotional toll is just as heavy. Many feel trapped. They don't want to leave their homes, but they can't keep up with the rising costs. Downsizing may not even help if all surrounding areas are experiencing similar hikes. And renters, they're not safe either. Landlords hit with high property taxes almost always pass those costs down in the form of higher rent. This isn't just about numbers on a tax bill. It's about the growing feeling that even if you own your home, the system can still push you out. Number 4. Rent cap removals are leading to explosive rent increases. If you thought your rent was already high, brace yourself. It could double or even triple in the next year. That's because in 2026, several provinces have either loosened or completely removed rent cap protections that once shielded tenants from sudden and extreme increases. Rent caps, also known as rent control, used to limit how much a landlord could raise rent each year, usually by a small percentage tied to inflation. But now, under pressure from developers and property lobbyists, these limits are being lifted in many areas. The justification? Encouraging investment and new housing supply. But the real result? Landlords are cashing in, and tenants are being pushed out. In cities like Toronto, Calgary, and Halifax, there are already reports of rent hikes of $800 to $1,200 overnight, especially for units that have become vacant and are now being relisted at market rates. Some landlords are even using legal loopholes, like renovictions, to evict long-term tenants and replace them with new ones at much higher prices. And here's the worst part. There's no limit anymore. Without caps, landlords can charge whatever the market allows, and in a housing crisis, that means desperation pricing. Families who've lived in the same apartment for years are now receiving notices telling them their rent is going up by 50%, 80%, or even more, with just 60 days to figure it out. This is hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. Students, single parents, low-income workers, people who can't just pack up and buy a house. And with vacancy rates at historic lows, there's nowhere affordable to go. Without rent control, tenants are no longer protected. They're exposed. And for millions across Canada, that means losing their homes without ever missing a payment. Number 5. Urban redevelopment projects are forcing entire communities to relocate. Imagine being told that your entire neighborhood is being demolished, not because it's unsafe, but to make room for a shiny new development you never asked for. Across Canada, that's becoming the new reality under the 2026 Housing and Infrastructure Law, which grants cities greater power to seize land for redevelopment projects. These projects are being branded as revitalization or green redevelopment, promising modern housing complexes, eco-parks, and transit hubs. But behind the glossy presentations lies a harsh truth. To build these future cities, existing communities must be cleared out. In some cases, the government is offering buyouts or relocation assistance, but often the compensation doesn't match the value of what residents are being forced to leave behind. The most affected, low-income and immigrant communities, many of whom have lived in the same neighborhoods for decades. They're watching their homes, local stores, schools, and community centers vanish, all in the name of progress. Entire blocks are being rezoned and fast-tracked for demolition under the banner of climate-friendly development. And if you're renting in one of these areas, you're even more vulnerable. Landlords are using these redevelopment announcements to serve eviction notices, often with minimal notice, knowing that tenants have little legal power to fight back. What's more shocking is how fast this is happening. With new federal funding tied to rapid urban transformation, cities are rushing to approve plans, often without meaningful input from the people who actually live there. This isn't just about losing a house. It's about losing your sense of place, your community, your belongings, and sometimes even your job if you can't afford to live nearby anymore. Urban redevelopment sounds good on paper, but for many Canadians, it's becoming a one-way ticket out of the only home they've ever known. If this video opened your eyes, drop a comment below, not just to share your thoughts, but to help others realize what's really happening. We pour hours into creating these deep dive videos, so if you found value here, hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Number 6. Vacancy taxes are penalizing owners and displacing renters. Think owning a second property or keeping a family home vacant temporarily is your right? Not anymore. Under the new 2026 housing laws, vacancy taxes have been dramatically expanded across multiple provinces, and the consequences are hitting harder than ever before. Originally designed to discourage wealthy investors from leaving properties empty while people struggle to find housing, the vacancy tax was supposed to free up unused homes. But now, the law has evolved, and it's sweeping in far more homeowners than anyone expected. The thresholds for vacancy have become stricter, and the fines are steeper. In some cities, homeowners are being charged 1 to 3% of their property's value annually just for leaving a home vacant for more than 90 days. Here's where it gets worse. Many Canadians who own seasonal homes, inherited properties, or temporary rentals are being blindsided. They're suddenly told they owe thousands in vacancy taxes, even if the property was only empty for part of the year due to illness, renovations, or family emergencies. And for renters, this means even more instability. Landlords, looking to avoid these hefty fines, are taking units off the market altogether, selling properties quickly or turning them into expensive short-term rentals. Long-term renters, especially those in vacation-heavy areas like BC's interior or Atlantic Canada, are being forced out as landlords scramble to stay compliant. The intention might have been to solve the housing crisis, but the result is a growing number of displaced tenants, frustrated owners, and homes caught in legal limbo. Worse yet, some homeowners are only finding out they've violated vacancy rules after receiving massive tax bills in the mail. If you own or rent property in Canada, ignoring vacancy laws could cost you your home or your savings. Number 7. Crackdown on informal housing is forcing thousands into homelessness. For years, informal housing has been a quiet lifeline for many Canadians. Basement suites, garage apartments, garden units, and even converted attics have provided affordable, accessible places to live. But now, under the 2026 housing enforcement rules, these once tolerated setups are being declared illegal at record speed, displacing thousands in the process. The government's new stance is that informal housing poses health, safety, and environmental risks, especially if the units weren't built to modern code. And while that concern isn't entirely unfounded, the aggressive crackdowns are leaving little room or time for families and landlords to adapt. Municipal inspectors are being directed to seek out and shut down non-conforming units, often with little warning. This means tenants receive sudden eviction notices, while homeowners are slapped with hefty fines or even legal action for renting out parts of their home. In cities like Montreal and Surrey, there have already been mass inspections, and the fallout has been brutal. What's worse? Many of these units are occupied by students, immigrants, low-income workers, and single parents, people who simply can't afford to rent at market rates. When their unit gets flagged, they don't just lose a roof over their heads, they lose stability, community, and any sense of security. For homeowners, it's a double blow. Many rely on rental income from these informal suites to pay their mortgage or support their family. Now they're being told to renovate or remove the units completely, with costs running into the tens of thousands. This crackdown isn't just cleaning up building codes, it's tearing apart the invisible housing safety net that millions of Canadians quietly depended on. And unless policies shift to support legal, affordable conversions, the displacement will only get worse. Number 8. Stricter mortgage rules are locking people out. What if you've done everything right, saved for years, bought your home, kept up with payments, and still lose it? In 2026, thousands of Canadians are now facing that exact nightmare, thanks to new mortgage qualification rules that are changing who gets to stay in their homes and who gets pushed out. Under the revised federal lending guidelines, banks and mortgage lenders are now required to apply tougher stress tests, even for renewals. That means even if you already have a mortgage, when it's time to renew, you may need to re-qualify under stricter conditions. Higher income requirements, lower debt thresholds, and rising interest rates are making it harder than ever for everyday Canadians to meet the new standards. For many, the numbers simply don't add up. People who bought homes just a few years ago at lower interest rates and under looser rules are suddenly being told they no longer qualify. Their only options? Accept a much higher interest rate with a private lender, sell their home quickly, or risk foreclosure. This is hitting middle-class families especially hard. They're not eligible for financial aid, but they also can't absorb an extra $1,000 to $2,000 per month in mortgage payments. In many cases, lenders are giving homeowners very little time to decide, creating a wave of forced sales, panic refinancing, and even bank repossessions. Renters aren't safe either. Many landlords facing higher mortgage costs are raising rents dramatically or selling their investment properties, leaving tenants scrambling. The new rules were meant to stabilize the market and reduce risk, but for thousands of Canadians, they've become a trapdoor. If you're not actively checking your mortgage renewal terms or planning ahead, you could lose your home without ever missing a single payment. Number 9. Foreclosure rates are surging. In past decades, foreclosures were usually tied to personal financial hardship, job loss, medical bills, or poor budgeting. But in 2026, a new wave of foreclosures is sweeping across Canada, and it's not just personal problems behind it, it's government policy. With interest rates at their highest in over a decade and new mortgage rules making refinancing nearly impossible for many homeowners, thousands are being pushed into default, even if they've never missed a payment before. Add in new housing compliance costs, like mandatory energy upgrades or surprise property tax hikes, and the financial strain becomes unbearable. Many Canadians are finding themselves in a situation where they can't refinance, can't afford rising payments, and can't sell fast enough, especially in areas where housing supply is starting to flood the market. And once you fall behind, banks are moving faster than ever to recover their losses. In some provinces, foreclosure notices can be served after just 60 to 90 days of missed payments. What's especially heartbreaking is how silent and invisible this crisis is. Families are quietly packing up and disappearing from neighborhoods. Some are forced into smaller rental units, moving in with relatives, or even into temporary shelters. Others are stuck in legal limbo, fighting to keep their homes while facing mounting legal and financial costs. Meanwhile, banks and private lenders are reselling repossessed homes to investors, often at a discount, further widening the gap between everyday Canadians and corporate property buyers. This isn't just a housing correction, It's a policy-driven foreclosure crisis. And if you're carrying a variable rate mortgage, have a renewal coming up, or live paycheck to paycheck, you may be closer to the edge than you think. Number 10. Immigration pressure without housing supply is creating a ticking time bomb. Canada is one of the most welcoming countries in the world, and in recent years, it has significantly increased immigration targets, aiming to bring in over 500,000 newcomers per year. While this enriches the country culturally and economically, there's one major problem. The housing supply hasn't kept up, and now millions of Canadians, both old and new, are paying the price. The 2026 housing strategy encourages rapid population growth, but it has failed to deliver on its promise to build enough affordable housing to meet that demand. The result? Exploding competition for a limited number of homes, skyrocketing rents, bidding wars for even the smallest properties, and a growing divide between who gets to live comfortably and who doesn't. In response, some provinces have quietly introduced priority housing access policies, which aim to support vulnerable newcomers. While the intention is noble, the execution is flawed. Long-term residents, people who've lived in a community their entire lives, are now being told they're no longer at the top of the list for subsidized housing or government-backed rental units. This is fueling resentment, division, and deepening the housing crisis, especially in already strained urban centers. Low-income Canadians, students, and seniors are being pushed out of the housing system entirely, as demand outpaces supply in nearly every province. And let's be clear, the issue isn't immigration itself, it's the government's failure to plan for the housing demand it created. Without bold, immediate action to build homes at scale, this imbalance will only get worse. For many, this pressure cooker of policy and population means one thing: losing their place in the only country they call home, not because they did anything wrong, but because the system failed to plan for the future. Canada is standing at a crossroads. What was once seen as a safe, stable place to call home is now becoming a landscape of uncertainty, legal pressure, and financial strain. The 2026 housing law may have been introduced with good intentions to address climate change, boost urban development, and increase housing supply. But its real-world effects are turning into a nightmare for millions of everyday Canadians. We've broken down 10 powerful reasons why this law could force people out of their homes, from zoning changes and tax hikes to rising foreclosures and policy-fueled rental chaos. But this isn't just about politics or policy. This is about your home, your security, your future. And if you're not paying attention now, the consequences could hit you when you least expect it. The scariest part? Most of these changes are already happening, quietly, quickly, and many won't realize what's coming until it's already too late. But awareness is the first step. By staying informed, knowing your rights, and taking action, you can protect yourself and your loved ones from getting caught in the storm.